His mind was a storm of questions, but his body refused to move. Amina walked farther down the sidewalk, her steps unhurried. Jiho's chest tightened as he stared at her, his eyes drinking in the sight of her. She looked the same, yet different. Stronger. More controlled. The city of Seoul buzzed with life as the late afternoon sunlight cut through the towering buildings, casting long shadows over the busy streets. Jiho Han's black luxury sedan glided smoothly through the vibrant neighborhood. The neon signs and flashing billboards were a stark contrast to the calm blue sky, while the sweet aroma of street food filled the air as people bustled around, each of them lost in their own world, unaware of the story unfolding in the midst of them. Inside the car, Jiho's expression was unreadable. His fingers lightly gripped the steering wheel, his sharp eyes scanning the streets with the precision of a man who had spent years navigating the complexities of both business and life in the underworld. His world was one of power, danger, and control, but as his car slowed down at a red light, everything changed in an instant. Across the street, she appeared, Amina Okafor. The name barely registered in his mind at first, but the sight of her sent a shock straight through his chest. She was walking casually down the street, a camel coat hugging her slender frame, her head slightly bowed as if lost in thought. The wind played with her long, dark curls, lifting them gently as if trying to bring her back to the moment. Her left hand rested on her belly, a subtle gesture that made something deep inside Jiho freeze. Pregnant. The word echoed through his mind, even though he hadn't yet fully processed what he was seeing. His lungs forgot how to work. His heartbeat thundered in his chest. This wasn't just a random encounter, it was Amina, the woman he had once sworn to never lose. The woman who had once been his world. And now she was carrying his child. Her eyes met his through the windshield. For a split second, it felt like time slowed. The noise of the street faded, the world outside his car narrowed, and all he could see was her. Her expression faltered for a moment, and Jiho's stomach tightened. That familiar feeling of guilt and regret hit him like a freight train. Was it his? Amina didn't stop walking. Her steps were calm, deliberate, as if nothing had changed, yet everything had. She had never planned for this moment, and Jiho knew it. She slipped into the flow of pedestrians like she had nothing left to say to him. Jiho's hands gripped the wheel harder. His foot hovered above the gas pedal, but his body was frozen, his mind racing. What was he supposed to do? Should he follow her? His instincts screamed for him to reach out, but his pride held him back. He was no longer the man who could chase her. The man she had once loved. His mind was a storm of questions, but his body refused to move. Amina walked farther down the sidewalk, her steps unhurried. Jiho's chest tightened as he stared at her, his eyes drinking in the sight of her. She looked the same, yet different. Stronger. More controlled. A part of him wanted to shout her name, to run to her and demand answers. But another part of him, the part that had learned to live in control, remained still. He wasn't the man he once was. Not anymore. His life was different now. His priorities were different. But when it came to Amina, nothing had changed. She still held a part of him that he couldn't let go of. The light changed, and the flow of traffic behind him honked impatiently, but Jiho didn't care. He pulled over at the first opening, parked quickly, and stepped out into the chilly air. It hit his face like a slap, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except Amina. He walked toward her. His long strides cut through the crowd as if they weren't even there. People moved aside instinctively, not because he was trying to intimidate them, but because of the energy he carried with him. He had that presence, the kind that made people shift out of the way without even realizing it. But Jiho didn't care about them. Amina was all that mattered now. She reached the far curb, but just as she was about to cross the street, something happened. A man bumped into her, distracted by his phone. Amina stumbled but caught herself quickly. Jiho's hand shot out before he could stop it, hovering near her waist, a protective instinct surging through him. The man muttered an apology and moved on, but Amina didn't even glance at him. She studied herself, her breath slow and controlled. She wasn't shaken by the incident. She was too strong for that. Too much time had passed, too much distance had been created. But when her eyes met Jiho's again, something flickered. Her gaze was cold, distant. Polite. Jiho, she said, her voice flat. It was just his name, but it sounded like a dagger in his chest. She had practiced this, practiced being calm without him. Practiced being strong without him. Jiho swallowed hard, trying to suppress the flood of emotions threatening to take over. Why hadn't she told him? Why hadn't she told him about the pregnancy? Was it his? His heart hammered in his chest, but he didn't ask. Not yet. Amina, you don't have to do this, Jiho said quietly, his voice rough. He didn't want to sound desperate, but he couldn't help it. His eyes couldn't stop darting to her belly, to the small bump that seemed to carry a world of secrets inside it. I'm fine, she said, her voice firm, but Jiho heard the strain underneath. He saw it in her eyes. The hurt she was trying so hard to hide. You don't get to say my name like we're strangers, he continued, his tone dropping lower. He was frustrated, angry with himself, but he wasn't going to let her dismiss him so easily. I'm not a stranger. You are, she said flatly, her words cutting through him like a knife. You're not the man I married. And I'm not the woman you think I am. Jiho didn't have a response. Her words hit too close to home. He could feel the weight of the years they had lost, the distance they had created. Every part of him wanted to argue, to fight back. But he knew deep down, she was right. Amina, he said softly, trying to reach her. How far along? She didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed forward, and for a brief moment, Jiho thought she might keep walking, might turn away from him completely. Far enough, she replied quietly. Jiho's breath caught. Far enough? What did that mean? Was the baby his? Had she moved on? The questions crowded his mind, but he didn't ask. Not yet. But just as Jiho was about to speak again, Amina's voice stopped him. Don't ask me any more questions, Jiho. This is where it ends. The words hung in the air, chilling the moment. Amina turned, her boots clicking softly on the pavement as she walked away. Jiho stood frozen, his heart pounding, the storm of emotions inside him only growing stronger. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure what to do next. Would he let her walk away again? Or would he do what he had never been able to do before, fight for her? Subscribe now to see how Jiho's world changes as he faces the woman he once loved and the secrets she's kept hidden. Will he fight to get her back, or will his past destroy everything? The evening air felt colder as they walked in silence, the hum of the city around them growing distant with each step. Jiho's mind raced, his heart pounding with every breath. He hadn't expected it to be like this. He hadn't expected her to be so guarded. He couldn't help but glance at Amina. She walked with purpose, her pace steady, yet something about the way she moved, the tightness in her posture, the way she kept her head slightly lowered, spoke of a woman who had long learned to carry her burdens alone. Jiho's heart twisted. Amina, he said, his voice almost gentle. Is it mine? The question hung between them, heavier than the cold air. Amina stopped abruptly, her back stiffening as if she'd been struck. Her face, once soft, turned into a mask of determination. Don't ask me that, she replied, her voice sharp, but with an undertone of pain she couldn't fully conceal. Why does it matter to you now? She turned to face him, eyes flashing, her tone defensive, as though she had built walls around herself that he hadn't been prepared to breach. Jiho's chest tightened. Because I need to know, Amina. I need to understand what's going on, he said, his frustration seeping through. He wasn't used to being kept in the dark, and this felt like a betrayal. Amina's eyes narrowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. She took a step back, the gap between them growing. You don't get to ask me these things anymore, Jiho, she said coldly. You gave up your right to know the truth the day you walked out. His heart sank. The words stung more than he expected, and he could feel the jealousy flare inside him, bitter, raw, like a poison spreading through his veins. Was it just his child, or was someone else involved in this? The thought was unbearable, but he fought to keep his composure. Do you think I left because I wanted to? His voice cracked as he spoke, the raw emotion he'd buried so long ago bubbling to the surface. I never wanted to leave you, Amina. But you made it impossible. You shut me out. Her eyes softened for a brief moment, but she quickly masked it, her walls coming back up. I didn't shut you out, Jiho. You shut us out. You put your world before everything. Before me, before us. He flinched. The words cut deep, but they were true. He had chosen the Mafia, his empire, over her and their future. And now, standing here, he realized how deeply he had hurt her, how much he had taken from her. I'm sorry, he whispered, but Amina didn't respond. She just shook her head, the familiar sadness in her eyes too much for him to bear. The silence between them stretched as they walked further, the bustling sounds of the city fading into the background. Jiho felt the weight of his past decisions settling in his chest like a stone. Every step he took felt heavier than the last. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to make things right, but Amina's walls were solid and impenetrable. They reached a quieter part of the neighborhood, the streets lined with old buildings and low-hanging trees. The soft glow of streetlights cast shadows along the pavement, creating an eerie sense of intimacy, as if the world had closed in around them. Jiho watched as Amina adjusted her coat, her protective hand once again resting on her belly. He didn't know what to say. He was torn between respecting her space and his overwhelming desire to protect her. His instincts screamed at him to step in, to do something, anything, but he knew better. He wasn't the man she once knew. He was no longer the man who could sweep her off her feet with promises of power and wealth. He was now the man who had to earn her trust back. Slowly, carefully. Let me walk you home, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Amina stopped, her body stiffening at his words. She turned to face him, her eyes cold but steady. I don't need you to walk me home, Jiho. I'm fine on my own. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the unspoken truth she was trying to hide. But he didn't press it. Not yet. I'm not offering to protect you from anything, Amina. I just want to make sure you're okay, he said quietly, his heart in his throat. Amina's jaw tightened. She looked away for a moment, as if trying to summon the strength to refuse him, but finally, her eyes met his, and she gave a small nod. I'm walking you to the corner, she said, her voice firm, but there was a flicker of something vulnerable, in her gaze that caught him off guard. Jiho nodded, his chest tightening. This was progress. But he knew better than to push. The space between them felt like an ocean, and though he had one foot in the water, he wasn't sure how to cross it. They walked in silence, the world moving around them, but neither of them cared about the noise. Their connection was undeniable, even if unspoken. As they neared the corner, Jiho felt the tension rise between them once again. It was in the way she clenched her fists at her sides, the way she kept her distance. She was still holding onto the past, and it was killing him. They reached the corner and Amina stopped, her eyes locking with his. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her gaze, something broken, something she was trying to protect. I don't want you to follow me again, Jiho, she said quietly, her voice breaking ever so slightly. Not like this. Not until I know I can trust you again. Jiho felt the wind knock the breath out of him. It was like being punched in the gut. His heart thudded painfully in his chest, but he didn't move. He couldn't. I understand, he whispered, the weight of the past few months crashing down on him. But I'm not giving up on you, Amina. Not again. I'll wait. I'll wait until you're ready. Amina's eyes flickered with something: doubt, hope, regret, but she didn't say a word. Instead, she turned and walked away, her boots tapping softly against the pavement, her coat swaying with each step. Jiho stood there, his breath ragged, watching her walk farther and farther from him. Was he too late? Had he lost her for good? Jiho stood frozen in the cold, his mind racing. There was so much left unsaid, so many things between them that needed to be fixed. But as Amina disappeared into the night, he realized that his fight had only just begun. Will Jiho be able to win back Amina's trust, or will his past mistakes keep him locked out of her heart forever? Subscribe now to find out what happens next. Don't miss the next chapter, where Jiho's decisions will put him face to face with his biggest challenge yet, the truth. The cold air hit Jiho's face like a slap, but he didn't feel it. His mind was too occupied with the images of Amina. She was there, walking away, her coat fluttering in the evening breeze, her eyes avoiding his, her body carrying his child. The realization of what he had done, how he had failed her, how he had let pride and ego take precedence over the one thing that mattered, hit him like a freight train. He stood alone in the quiet street, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. The city felt colder now, the lights dimmer, as if even Seoul knew how broken he was. It was a coldness that seeped into his bones, not from the weather, but from the deep regret and guilt he could no longer escape. Jiho had always prided himself on his ability to control everything. His empire, his life, his relationships. But this was different. Amina had always been different. And now, standing there, frozen in the dark, Jiho realized just how much he had lost. His mind flashed back to the day she walked out of his life, her suitcase packed, her heart shattered. He had told himself it was for the best, that their lives were headed in separate directions, that she was better off without him and the dangerous world he had built around himself. But looking back now, he saw the truth. He was the one who couldn't let go. He had walked away from her, thinking it was the easiest way out. But deep inside, Jiho knew he had never truly let her go. The truth was, he had never really loved anyone the way he loved Amina. She had left, but it wasn't just her departure that broke him. It was the realization that he had pushed her away because he didn't know how to hold on to her. He had taken her for granted, assuming she would always be there, waiting for him. But she had moved on, and now she was carrying their child. As Jiho stood there in the quiet of the street, his heart clenched. How could he fix this? He wasn't the man she had once known. He wasn't sure if he even knew who he was anymore. But one thing was clear, he wasn't going to give up on her. He had hurt her. He had failed her. But he would spend every day from here on out proving to her that he could be the man she needed. Not the man he had been, but the man she deserved. His resolve hardened. Jiho knew that earning Amina's trust wouldn't be easy. He couldn't expect to fix everything in one night or even 1 month. This was going to take time. The cold wind blew again, but Jiho barely felt it now. His decision was made. He would do whatever it took to protect Amina and to win her back. The following morning, Jiho's thoughts were still consumed by Amina. He couldn't get her out of his mind. Her face, the way her lips had trembled when she spoke his name, the defensive walls she had put up to shield herself from him, it haunted him. But as he sat in his sleek, modern office, surrounded by his world of high-end suits and the glass walls of his empire, Jiho knew this wasn't just about winning her back. It was about understanding her, respecting her space, and being a man who could finally put her needs before his own. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. His trusted confidant and longtime friend, Miho Park, answered on the second ring. Jiho, Miho's voice came through the line, calm and steady. What's going on? Jiho didn't waste time with pleasantries. I need your advice, he said, leaning back in his chair. Amina. She's pregnant. Miho didn't respond immediately. He was smart enough to know that Jiho didn't share things like this lightly. You're telling me this now? Miho asked, his voice careful. What's your plan, Jiho? Jiho ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. I don't even know how to fix things between us, Miho. I walked away from her once. I thought it was for the best. But now, his voice faltered for a moment. Now, I realize I was wrong. Miho let the silence stretch. He knew Jiho well enough to know that his words weren't coming out easily. The man had never been one to admit mistakes. You can't fix everything by force, Jiho, Miho said finally. You can't just make things right because you want to. She has to want it too. I know that, Jiho snapped, his frustration bubbling over. He didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to be told what he already knew. He needed answers, a solution, a way forward. Miho sighed. You've built a life for yourself in a world that doesn't allow for weakness. But this, he paused, carefully choosing his next words. Amina isn't something you can control. She's her own person. You have to give her the space to make her own decisions. Jiho swallowed, the weight of Miho's words sinking in. He had always been a man of action control, but Miho was right. He couldn't force Amina to forgive him, to trust him again. I just want to protect her, Jiho said quietly. I want to make things right. Miho's voice softened. And you will. But not by pushing her. You have to earn her trust, Jiho. You have to show her that you're the man she needs. Not the man you think you are, but the man she deserves. Jiho stared out the window, his thoughts spinning. He had never been the kind of man who took things slow, who allowed vulnerability to guide him. But Miho was right. If he wanted to win Amina back, he had to change. And that meant respecting her boundaries. I'll do it, Jiho said with conviction. I'll do whatever it takes. Jiho spent the next few days in turmoil. Every plan he made, every decision he considered, came back to the same question. What does Amina need from me? His world was built on control, on power, on being the boss. But with Amina, it wasn't enough. He couldn't control her. He couldn't force her to forgive him or accept him back into her life. He had to prove himself. His thoughts returned to her often, the way her eyes had met his on the street, the way her voice had shaken when she said his name. She was still the woman he loved. But she was also stronger now, more independent. And that terrified him. The night he had followed her was a turning point, and Jiho knew he couldn't make the same mistakes again. He had to respect her distance, but at the same time, he couldn't let her slip through his fingers without a fight. He was a man who had conquered empires, who had built his name in the shadows of Seoul's underworld. But this was different. This was Amina. And for her, he would do whatever it took to break down the walls he had built around his heart. But as Jiho sat in his office, surrounded by plans and papers, he received a message on his phone. His heart stopped when he saw the name, Amina. It was just a few words, but they sent a wave of emotion crashing through him. I'm at the cafe we used to visit. Come by. Jiho stared at the message, his mind racing. Was this a second chance? Or was this the moment where he would finally lose her for good? Subscribe now to find out what happens next. Jiho's battle to win Amina back is far from over, and it's about to take a turn he never saw coming. The moment Jiho's phone buzzed, his chest tightened. He knew that feeling all too well. The name that flashed on the screen was one he had hoped he'd never see again, Harper Lane. Her name felt like a shadow from his past that refused to stay buried. Jiho's fingers hovered over the screen, the weight of memories threatening to pull him back to a time he had long since abandoned. Harper Lane wasn't just anyone. She was someone from Jiho's darker days, before Amina, before he had tried to change. Harper was the kind of woman who didn't take no for an answer. She had been Jiho's liaison in the early days of his rise to power, a woman with ambition as sharp as a blade, always pushing boundaries, always testing limits. But as Jiho's empire grew, so did the danger she brought into his life. She had been a calculated risk, but the day Jiho realized how deep into his world she had embedded herself, he cut ties. It was a decision he thought would protect Amina, but Harper never liked being discarded. And now Jiho feared she was back, and she had Amina in her sights. Jiho didn't need to read the message. He already knew what it was. The familiar, eerie feeling crept up his spine as he remembered the countless times Harper had used her charm and power to manipulate situations to her advantage. Her presence had always been like a storm cloud, lingering just over the horizon, waiting to strike. He knew that whatever game Harper was playing now, it would put Amina in danger. It wasn't just about power or control anymore. Harper had always had a way of weaving herself into Jiho's life, leaving chaos in her wake. And now, Jiho feared she would use Amina's vulnerability, the pregnancy, the potential cracks in Jiho's protective armor, to force her way back in. As if on cue, Jiho's phone vibrated again. He opened the message, his stomach sinking with every word. She looks good. Pregnancy suits her. The words burned through Jiho like acid. They weren't just a taunt. They were a warning. Harper knew something about Amina that she hadn't told him. Something he had to protect her from. Jiho clenched his jaw, his mind racing. How had Harper found out? What else had she uncovered? And, most importantly, what would she do with that information? Amina had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. She had no idea that Jiho's past was threatening their future. The weight of the message lingered as Jiho made his decision. He would not let Harper destroy Amina's life. Jiho's world had always been one of shadows, an empire built on secrecy, manipulation, and control. But Amina had changed everything. She was the light he never thought he'd need. And now, someone from his past was threatening to snuff that light out. He couldn't let that happen. Not again. Without a second thought, Jiho set his plan into motion. He didn't want to involve Amina in this. She had already carried enough of the burden, and Jiho refused to let her be pulled into his past. He would handle it himself, quietly, without her knowing. He hired a small team of trusted men, people who were discreet and could ensure Amina's safety without her awareness. They were to keep an eye on her, make sure she wasn't being followed, make sure Harper's influence didn't reach her. As Jiho organized the details, his mind wrestled with the idea of how far he was willing to go. The world he lived in was dangerous, unpredictable, and Amina was the one person he couldn't protect with sheer force alone. She needed to stay independent, to stay free of his world. But the more Jiho thought about it, the more conflicted he became. How could he protect her without suffocating her? How could he keep her safe from someone like Harper without her knowing the truth? Amina's independence had always been one of the things Jiho loved about her. But it also terrified him now. What if his need to protect her led him to push her further away? What if he lost her for good, this time because of his own fear? As Jiho's men quietly worked behind the scenes, he couldn't help but observe Amina from afar. She had become so careful, so guarded, yet still so strong. Jiho saw the subtle ways she protected herself, how her hand instinctively rested over her belly whenever she was out in public, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Amina was used to keeping things to herself, guarding not just her body but her emotions too. The distance between them had grown, and Jiho hated that he couldn't bridge that gap. The last time they were together, their connection was raw and unspoken, but now? Now, she was a stranger to him. Jiho watched her in the crowded streets, catching glimpses of her through the crowd. She was never far from his thoughts, but seeing her like this, alone, walking with a quiet strength, it tore him apart. Every time she walked down the street, Jiho felt the old instinct to step in, to shield her from the chaos of the world around her. But he knew better now. He couldn't protect her from everything. He couldn't shield her from Harper, from the darkness of his past that was creeping back into their lives. But he couldn't just stand back and do nothing. Amina deserved more than that. Jiho sat in his office later that evening, staring at his phone once again. Another message from Harper. "The game's just beginning, Jiho." His heart dropped. He had been hoping it was a bluff, that Harper would let him go. But he knew better now. Harper was playing for keeps. Jiho's fist tightened around the phone. He had to act fast. Amina's safety was on the line, and if he didn't move now, Harper would destroy everything. But was it too late to protect her from what was already in motion? Subscribe now to find out how Jiho's past will collide with his present, and if he can keep Amina safe from the shadow that's stalking them both. The sun had begun to set, casting an orange glow across the city as Jiho and Amina found themselves at a small, quiet cafe, a place they used to visit often. The world outside seemed so distant, muffled by the thick glass windows. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped, as if the past few years had never happened. But as Amina sat across from Jiho, her eyes avoiding his, he knew things were far from normal. Her lips were pressed together tightly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her walls were still up, and Jiho felt the heaviness of that silence hanging between them. He had been waiting for this moment, the moment when Amina would finally tell him the truth behind why she had kept their child a secret. He had his suspicions, but he wasn't sure if he was ready to hear the answer. Jiho cleared his throat. "Amina, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me about the baby?" Amina didn't look up. She stared into her coffee cup, her fingers tracing the edge of the mug. I didn't want you to be part of this, she said quietly, her voice shaking just slightly. The words were simple, but they cut deep. Jiho's chest tightened, and his heart sank. What do you mean? Amina finally looked up at him, her eyes filled with a pain Jiho had never seen before. I didn't want to bring a child into your world, Jiho. Your world is dangerous. Your world. It's violent, unpredictable, and I couldn't risk bringing a child into that. I couldn't risk raising a child with you and watching them get pulled into the chaos that surrounds you. You might think you can protect me, but the truth is, I don't know if you can protect him or her. Her voice faltered as she spoke, and for the first time, Jiho saw the vulnerability that had been hidden beneath her strong exterior. This wasn't the Amina he remembered. The woman who always held her own, who stood tall in the face of danger. No, this Amina was different. This Amina was broken, afraid of the very world Jiho had once tried to pull her into. I didn't want to burden you with something you couldn't handle, she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. I didn't want our child to grow up in a world where they would never know safety, where they would always be looking over their shoulder, wondering when the next danger would come knocking. Jiho felt the weight of her words settle into his chest like a stone. She had been right to protect herself, to keep him at arm's length. He had built a life filled with danger, a life that no child should ever have to witness. He had pushed her away once before, and now he was faced with the harsh reality of what that had cost them. Jiho sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Amina's words were like a slap, and they stung in ways he didn't want to admit. He had always known his world was dangerous, but hearing it from her, hearing it from the woman he loved, made him realize just how far gone they were. He wasn't the man he used to be. The man who once ruled with an iron fist, who crushed anyone who stood in his way. That man was gone. And as much as Jiho hated to admit it, that man had no place in Amina's world or their child's world. I understand, Jiho said quietly, his voice rough. I understand why you kept this from me. But you need to know this, I'm not that man anymore. I swear to you, Amina. I will do whatever it takes to protect you and the baby. I will fight for you both, no matter the cost. Amina shook her head, her gaze softening for a brief moment, but her walls were still up. I don't want you to fight for me, Jiho. I want you to be a man who can give up the life you're living. I want you to choose us, not the danger, not the empire you've built. Jiho leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. I will choose you. I will choose us. I'm done with that life for good. I know it won't be easy, but I will do whatever it takes. I'll build a future for you, Amina, for the baby. A future where we don't have to live in fear every day. Amina looked at him, her eyes full of doubt, but there was a flicker of something there, something that told Jiho she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man who stood before her now was someone worth trusting. But the past had created too much distance, too many scars. I don't know if I can trust you again, Jiho, she said softly, almost to herself. I don't know if I can ever believe that the man you are now is the man who will stay. Jiho felt the sting of her words, but they didn't deter him. He knew this would take time. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to prove to Amina that he was the man she needed. The man he should have been all along. I'll show you, Jiho promised, his voice filled with determination. I'll prove it to you every day. I'll be the man you can trust. The man you deserve. Amina's eyes softened, but she didn't speak. The silence between them felt heavy, but there was an unspoken understanding, a small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. For the first time, Jiho saw hope in her eyes. Their conversation hung in the air, thick with emotion. Jiho sat there, willing the silence to break, his heart aching with every passing second. He wanted to say more. He wanted to reach out and hold her, but he knew better. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a touch or a promise. Amina's walls were still up, but Jiho wasn't going anywhere. He had spent too much time running from his past, too much time ignoring the things that truly mattered. And now, standing in front of Amina, he knew he couldn't keep hiding from the truth. I'm sorry, Jiho said softly. I'm sorry for everything. For all the pain I caused you. For making you feel like you had to protect yourself from me. I'll never make that mistake again. Amina's eyes filled with tears again, and she quickly wiped them away. I just want to be safe, Jiho. I want to raise our child in peace. I want to feel like I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder. I will make sure of that, Jiho replied, his voice steady but full of emotion. I will do whatever it takes to make you feel safe again. I promise you, Amina, I will be the man you can trust. For the first time, Amina didn't push him away. She didn't pull back from his touch. Instead, she looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment, Jiho thought he saw hope flicker in her eyes. But just as Jiho thought they were on the brink of something new, something real, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from Harper. It was a call. A call from someone who could ruin everything. Jiho's heart dropped as he saw the name on the screen. Miho. He answered, his voice tight with dread. What is it? The words Miho spoke next shattered the fragile peace Jiho had fought so hard to build. Jiho, you need to get to her now. Something's happened. Amina turned to him, her face pale with worry. What was happening? And how far would Jiho have to go to protect her this time? Subscribe now to find out what Jiho's next move will be. The stakes are higher than ever, and Jiho's fight for Amina's trust is far from over. The cafe felt colder now, though Jiho wasn't sure if it was the chill in the air or the tension that hung heavy between them. Amina's gaze was steady, her hands folded in front of her, her posture erect as if she were already prepared for whatever was coming. She had made her decision. She had always been strong, stronger than Jiho had ever given her credit for. But today, there was something in the way she sat, something in the quiet way she spoke that made him realize just how much she had grown. Amina, Jiho began, but she raised a hand, stopping him before he could say anything more. I'm not asking for much, Jiho, she said softly, her voice steady but firm. I just need to know that you understand. I don't want any more involvement from you unless it's on my terms. Her words hit him like a punch. Jiho's throat tightened, and for a moment, he was at a loss for words. He had expected something like this, but hearing it aloud was a different thing altogether. He wasn't surprised by her request, but the sting of it, of how deeply he had let things go, how far they had drifted, cut through him. He knew why she had said it. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the fear that she might get hurt again, and he understood. He wasn't the man she needed him to be. Not yet. But as he sat there, staring at Amina, at the woman who had always been the anchor of his life, he realized how much he still wanted her. But he also knew he had to respect her. Jiho leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the edge of the table. He couldn't rush her. He had tried before, and that had only pushed her further away. No, this time, he had to show her that he was willing to earn her trust. That he wasn't going to give up on them, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. Her terms were simple: no more pushing, no more pressuring, just respect. But that was the hardest part. Respecting Amina's wishes meant he couldn't act on his instinct to protect her at every turn. He had to wait, to let her come to him on her own terms. It was a test, one he wasn't sure he was prepared for, but one he had no choice but to accept. Amina, he said quietly, his voice low but filled with determination. I'm not asking you to forgive me today. Or tomorrow. But I will prove to you that I can be the man you need me to be. I won't rush this. I'll wait as long as it takes. But I need you to know I'm here. I'm not leaving. Amina's eyes softened just a little, but there was still that wall between them. She nodded once, a small acknowledgement of his words, but the doubt in her gaze lingered. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But she wasn't ready to let go of the fear, the hurt. And Jiho understood that now more than ever. He had to show her, not just tell her. And that would take time. Jiho's mind raced in the quiet moments that followed their conversation. The promise he had made to Amina sat heavy in his chest, a constant reminder that he couldn't rush this. Trust, that was the word, the thing that Amina had given him once, and the thing he had shattered. Now he had to rebuild it, brick by brick, without expecting it to be easy. He spent the next few days thinking of ways to approach this new phase of their relationship. He couldn't just show up unannounced, couldn't force his way back into her life. No, he had to respect her boundaries, show her that he was capable of taking a step back. His pride, his instinct to control, was the thing that had driven them apart. If he was going to rebuild what they had to let her lead. But that didn't mean he could do nothing. Every small gesture, every quiet action would be a step forward. Jiho made sure Amina was safe without her knowing, ensuring her home was secure, keeping an eye on the streets around her. He kept his distance, never intruding, never pushing. But he was there. He was always there, watching from afar, waiting for the day when she would look at him and see the man he had become, not the man he used to be. One day, he saw Amina at a local market. She was standing by a stall, examining some fresh produce. Jiho's heart skipped a beat as he watched her. She looked so at peace, so natural in this small moment. It was a side of her he hadn't seen in so long, the Amina who had no walls up, the Amina who had loved him so fiercely. He wanted to approach, to speak to her, but he didn't. Instead, he stood at a distance, watching her. A small, bittersweet smile tugged at his lips. He hadn't seen her this way in years. Amina glanced up, and for a brief second, their eyes locked. Jiho could see the hesitation in her gaze, the unspoken question in her eyes. Should she let him in again? But instead of walking toward him, she turned, and with one last glance, she walked away. The door was still closed. Jiho sighed, feeling the weight of her withdrawal. He had to keep waiting. Patience, that was what it would take. He would continue to make subtle, supportive moves, but he couldn't push her. Not yet. She needed to come to him when she was ready. As the days went by, Jiho's internal conflict deepened. He watched from the sidelines as Amina navigated her world, never once asking for his help, yet always seeming to carry the weight of everything on her shoulders. Jiho couldn't shake the urge to step in, to make things easier for her, but he knew he couldn't. Not yet. She had to choose him, and he had to earn that choice. There was a quiet moment one evening when Jiho saw Amina in the park. She sat on a bench alone, looking at the city skyline, lost in thought. The way the light caught her face made her look almost ethereal. It was one of those rare moments when the world slowed down, and Jiho saw her for who she truly was: strong, independent, yet vulnerable. The contradictions that made her the woman he loved. Jiho wanted to walk over, to sit beside her, to hold her hand, and reassure her that he was still there. But he knew better. He stayed at a distance, his heart aching, but his resolve unwavering. This was his time to prove that he could be the man she needed. But just as Jiho was about to walk away, he saw something that stopped him dead in his tracks. A figure in the distance was watching Amina. Someone he didn't recognize, a shadow lurking just outside her line of sight. Jiho's heart skipped a beat. Was this someone from his past? Or was this another threat to Amina's safety? He took a step forward, his body moving on instinct. But before he could get any closer, the figure disappeared into the crowd. Who was watching Amina? And what would Jiho do when he finds out who's behind the threat? Subscribe now to find out what happens next. Jiho's quest to rebuild his trust with Amina is about to take a dangerous turn, one that might just change everything. The weight of the past lingered, but with each passing day, Jiho found a way to step forward slowly, cautiously, yet with a resolve that burned deeper than anything he had ever known. Amina had made her terms clear. She needed space, but not distance. She needed time to figure out where she stood, and Jiho had to respect that. Respect, it was the one thing he hadn't shown her in the past, and now it was the one thing he needed to give her in abundance. Jiho's days had become a blend of patience and action. He didn't try to force his way into Amina's life, but he made sure she knew he was there, always in the background, always supporting her without suffocating her. He couldn't change the past, but he could show her that he was ready for the future they could build together. At night, after his meetings, Jiho would walk by the small cafe where Amina often spent her afternoons. He didn't linger, he didn't approach her. But every time he saw her, his heart tightened. She was always reading a book or talking to the barista, never glancing up to see him standing a few feet away, hidden by the shadows. But Jiho didn't mind. He was learning that love wasn't about forcing someone to notice you. It was about quietly showing up, being there when they needed you, without asking for anything in return. And Amina needed him now more than ever. He had made a vow to protect her, to help her rebuild her life after everything had shattered, and he would keep that vow, even if it meant waiting for her to come to him when she was ready. One evening, as Jiho sat in his office, reviewing plans for an upcoming meeting, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Amina. His heart skipped a beat as he opened it. "I'm at the park. Come by." Jiho didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat and headed out the door, his mind racing. Was this the moment? The moment where everything changed? Or was it just another step in a long road that still felt too uncertain? The park was quieter than usual that evening, the light from the street lamps casting long shadows across the path. Jiho found Amina sitting on the same bench where they had once shared late-night conversations, their words flowing freely like the rhythm of their hearts. Amina looked up as he approached, her eyes soft but guarded, as if she was bracing herself for something. Jiho stopped a few feet away, not wanting to push any closer. He had learned to read her, to understand the signs that told him when to keep his distance, when to press forward, and when to just let things breathe. "You came," Amina said, her voice low but warm, a hint of surprise in her words. There was something unspoken in the air, something fragile that neither of them wanted to break. Jiho nodded. "I'm here. I'll always be here, Amina." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked down at the ground, her fingers tracing the edge of the bench, her thoughts seemingly far away. Jiho could feel the tension building in the air, like the space between them was shrinking but still just out of reach. "Amina," Jiho began, his voice careful. "I know I can't fix everything, but I want you to know that I'll never stop trying. I'll never stop fighting for you, for us." Amina's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no coldness there, no walls. Just raw honesty. "I'm scared, Jiho. I'm scared of everything. Scared of what we've become. And I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I used to." Jiho's heart sank. The words hit harder than any punch he had ever taken. But he didn't flinch. He stayed steady, because he knew he had to be steady. "I'm not asking you to trust me overnight," Jiho said quietly, stepping a little closer, but not too close. "But I promise you I'll prove it to you. Day by day. No shortcuts. No rushing." Amina remained silent, her eyes studying him carefully, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Jiho could feel the weight of her gaze, but this time, he didn't look away. The moments stretched on. And then, almost imperceptibly, Amina shifted, her posture relaxing just a fraction. "You don't have to fix everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just need to know you're here, that you're not going anywhere." Jiho stepped forward, finally closing the distance between them. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't pull her into an embrace. He simply sat next to her on the bench, the small gesture speaking volumes. "I'm here, Amina," he said softly. "And I'm not going anywhere. I promise." For a long while, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, side by side, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. But something else was there now too, something lighter, something that felt like a beginning. It was fragile, but it was there. The world around them faded into the background. There were no more words needed. This moment, this connection, was everything. As Jiho glanced at Amina, he saw something in her eyes, a flicker of hope. The kind of hope he had been longing for, the kind of hope that meant maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at this. But just as the tension between them seemed to break, a loud bang echoed through the park. It wasn't far off, but it was enough to make both of them stiffen, their attention snapping back to the real world. Jiho's instincts kicked in immediately. His body moved before his mind even processed what was happening. Amina looked at him, panic rising in her eyes. Jiho stood up quickly, scanning the surroundings, his heart pounding in his chest. The world had just shifted, and not in the way he had hoped. Something was wrong, and they were no longer alone. Amina clutched her coat tighter, her face pale with fear. "What was that?" she whispered. Jiho didn't answer. He just reached out, pulling her gently behind him, his protective instincts flaring to life. Whatever was happening, he wasn't going to let anything happen to Amina. Not tonight. Not ever again. Who was behind the noise? What was waiting for them in the shadows? And how far would Jiho go to protect the future he was finally starting to build with Amina? Subscribe now to find out what happens next. Jiho's fight for Amina is far from over, and the danger lurking in the shadows may tear them apart before they ever get a chance at happiness.